Today's savvy marketers are always on the lookout for the next coolest thing that they can try. If it's going to drive engagement and optimize their results, they're interested. And I'd highly recommend that you check out API-based campaigns. They aren't necessarily new, but they drive powerful results. So, what's an API-based campaign anyway? And before we can talk about an API-based campaign, we've got to start with a building block, which is what is an API? And in its simplest form, an API is just a way to send data from one destination to another. Data lives in point A, we need to send an API call to pass it over to point B. And it plays a role in API-based campaigns. These are campaigns where the API itself is either triggering the specific send or it's putting in dynamic copy and messaging into the program itself. And there are three main types of API-based campaigns. The first is an API-triggered campaign. The next is an API-personalized campaign. And the last is just called an API campaign. And they all sound very similar, and so I can definitely understand why there might be some confusion, but they all perform very different functions. The first is an API-triggered campaign. Most often, you're going to see this with transactional messaging. This is one where the API call itself is sending the message. The copy, the audience, the conversion, everything is going to be built in a CRM like Braze, but the actual send is going to wait for a server call from your back end. We see this most often with new user campaigns, maybe password resets, order confirmation, delivery notification, things like that. Next is an API personalized campaign, and this is where dynamic content is pulled in via the API itself. So maybe you're trying to send a campaign that's using the weather. You don't want to have weather data living in a CRM. That's very inefficient. It's probably wasteful when it comes to data point consumption, but it's still a use case that's really powerful and effective. So you want to say, if it's over 90 degrees, send this campaign. If it's over 70 degrees but under 90 degrees, send this campaign. You can make an API call to an endpoint that houses weather data to do just that. Here's an example of what it would look like if you were trying to send an API personalized campaign based off of movie times in someone's area. Again, this is curated. This is made just for Elliot, but it's not data that needs to live in a CRM. Instead, use an API call for its benefit. And then this is what it could look like if there weren't showtimes available. Maybe instead you could ask them to go check out what's streaming. It's a nice way to build out campaigns that are dynamic and templated at the message send, and it's not stale data from 30 minutes ago or 3 days ago. And lastly, you have API campaigns. This is one where every single thing about the message lives in the API call. You're not building the message in a CRM, you're not creating the subject line or putting in an image, you're not doing anything within a CRM. Instead, all of the data lives in the API call. We often see this for breaking news. Maybe you have editors that are typing in the headline and the soundbite into a CMS. That CMS input can create an API call that sends the message immediately. The fewer clicks you have to click, the faster you can send a message. But it's imperative that you also have API campaign-based analytics. Just because the entire message is sent via API doesn't mean that you should lose out on the rich data that comes from all the engagement. Maybe you want to retarget off of it. That's why you want to work with a partner that leverages and supports API-based campaigns, specifically an API campaign with analytics. But don't just take my word for it. We see results that speak for themselves. We had a commissioned study with Forrester that looked at over 530 billion messages over 2 years, and this is what we saw. Dynamic content drives higher engagement. We're seeing higher open rates and higher unique clicks. And likewise, API-triggered campaigns that were compared to scheduled campaigns always outperform them. We saw higher open rates and higher conversion rates when you're using an API to trigger the message instead of scheduling it at a specific time. We have a whole breakdown of the different kinds of API campaigns and their benefits. All of this is living on the Braze Perspectives page. I would highly recommend that you check out our articles about API campaigns and let us know if you have any questions. We're here to help. My name is Jordan. I'm on the Braze Customer Success team. Thanks so much for listening.